Do you remember when I last talked to you about these exotic animals and how they shouldn't be kept as pets? And then I gave you an example of what is a good pet. Well, now let's switch it up a little bit and let's take a look at places that do have these exotic animals and the effects of having them. Now, these places are usually seen as a safe environment, one that takes care of these animals, even a zoo. Now, I know you've been to the zoo at least once. Do you remember the strange animals that were there that you might not see anywhere else? Now, do you remember the amount of people that were there that even the animal could see? In the wild, do you ever see people just walk up to the animals and start watching them or even pet them? How about, do you see those animals walk up to us? The answer is no. Why? Well, because they're scared of us. I plan to inform you about the first zoo that was ever created and persuade you that these animals aren't getting the care they need in these zoos and that their behaviors change while in captivity. To start off, we should go back to the time that this all began. Just so everyone knows, according to National Geographic, a zoo is a place where animals live in captivity so they can be put on display for people to see. The first zoo, built in 1874 in Philadelphia, opened in July to over 3,000 guests and housed 200 mammals, including buffalo, deer, foxes, wolves, and monkeys, as well as 67 bird species and 15 reptiles, according to Wikipedia. This is one of the only places that breed their animals in their sanctuary and have been successful in doing so. Their facility is 42 acres, which is about 32 football fields put together. One major thing that can become an issue is the upkeep. These animals and enclosures have to have accommodations, such as temperature and humidity. Now, these things can vary from enclosure to enclosure, such as if you were to visit a penguin versus a tropical snake. See, zoos have to constantly keep this up for the environments, which can cause them to spend all their money on keeping up the environments rather than trying to actually imitate the natural habitats. When we look at the first zoo that was ever created, they actually didn't have open cages where the animals could go outside and see the natural light. Instead, they were stone fence, Victorian stone facade columns, and wrought iron gateway, which is all designed by architect Frank Furness, according to Hidden History. Now, this zoo, since it was the first one ever created, did have a lot of visitors. You might be thinking, well, where am I going with this? You'll be finding out very shortly. Phew! Now that we've talked about the background of the first zoo ever created, we can talk about how these animals in captivities aren't getting the care they need to the full potential. Do you know where these animals would get the care they need? You guessed it! In the wild. Do you ever see a cheetah at a zoo run and tackle down their prey? Or a gorilla pick greens and berries from a tree or little bugs in the ground? How about a polar bear having to break the thick ice to get a sea lion? You know that this is how these animals behave. You don't see any of this in a zoo. These animals are being deprived of who they naturally are supposed to be. In fact, all the food gets handed to animals while they're in their exhibits. They give them dead meat to eat out of a bucket, or they just toss fish into the water to imitate them swimming. Not only is a Victorian stone cage an example, but in all zoos, you see animals trapped in jail cells and no way to escape. The unfair living doesn't just stop there. According to Jason DeRusho in CBS Minnesota. He reported that when animals go to sleep, they are escorted to their pens, where there is hay laid down for some of them, while the others have to sleep on the cold concrete and wood. This isn't natural. But consider this scenario. If the cages were all left open, then the animals would flee and be free, right? But if the animals truly wanted to be there, then they would never have the urge to leave. Not only can they not leave, but zoos are just using the animals to profit off of. According to Elizabeth Turnbull's paper, she gives an example of how the Toronto Zoo gets rare exotic animals from other countries and breeds them and then makes money off of it. $1.85 million to be exact. And that doesn't come from just entry fees or donations. Zoos don't care about the animals. All they care about is making money. You see how the first zoo operated, and now you just learned how animals are treated while in captivity, which isn't very uplifting. But both of these things contribute to how animals are treated while in captivity, which we will be looking at next. Now, how exactly does their behavior change? Well, their behavior can become very worn out or very aggressive. They don't always have a lot to do while in the enclosure, so they spend most of their time relaxing. Zookeepers even try to put in toys to try and entertain them, but they seem to be missing something. Now that we have gone over how the first zoo was made, the lack of care these animals are receiving, and how the behaviors are affected through captivity, it's time to start wrapping up. As you can see from the initial speech and this one, exotic animals don't belong in households or zoos because we cannot provide them with the resources they need or how they should live. We cannot imitate the wild. Thank you.